Hello, everyone. So, today again we have Tim with us. And as I have been just blabbing about this book for such a long time, Klara and the Sun, I finally have finished it. And also, you have a different cover. We'll get to the difference of the covers in a bit. So, it's a book that I enjoyed immensely while I was reading it. And I really wanted to talk about the book with someone. So Tim is here with us today. Tim, I think your copy has the US cover and mine has a UK cover. So the UK cover looks something like this. I'm sorry for the glossy uh, cover, plastic cover that I've put on it, and that's what the US cover looks like. In India we have these two editions. One is the paperback, and the other is the hardcover, and it has like a gold spine and stuff. It's supposed to be this special thing. Now we also have this book in paperback mass market edition, so that's also available now, but this was a large format print, so I kind of found it more comfortable to read. Okay, so Tim, what was your reaction to this novel? How did you like it?
I was surprised. I enjoyed it very much. Sometimes Ishiguro's work doesn't always mesh well with me. Have you read his, the one before this was The Giant,
The Buried Giant.
The Buried Giant?
Yeah.
And the one before that? No,
Uh,
I'm wrong. What's the one about the clones? Never Let Me Go.
Never Let Me Go. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I found Never Let Me Go was something of a plod, but the subject that it dealt with was so powerful, so heartbreaking. It looks at an economy where clones are an industry, where rich people can have clones, a clone made of themselves. And these clones are raised from childhood, understanding that their sole purpose in life is spare parts. So they all understand that eventually they're going to end up in the hospital losing this organ or that organ, and that eventually this organ donation will be their death, but they've accepted it. They know that's their purpose in life. So it's a pretty strong novel, but it's also hard to read. Just the pacing, the plotting. And with many of Ishiguro's works like this kind of sci-fi, it seems to, Ishiguro enjoys not letting you understand fully what's happening until more than halfway through the novel. And I think Klara and the Sun was the same way. You don't
Definitely.
really get a full focus of what's wrong with the human child, Josie, and what is the mother planning to do until more than halfway through the novel.
More than two-thirds, I believe.
Yeah, more than 2/3. Yes,
What
brutal.
I felt was very fascinating in this book, the way of writing and the writing style and all of that, was that he would want to tell you something and he would not tell you in a direct, upfront way. So he will show you what's happening in the world
Hmm.
to make you understand what he wants to say. Generally, the writing techniques many authors follow is they take up a fixed set of characters and they tell you the story through those characters and what happens to them. In Clara and the Sun, it was more like what's happening in the world. And that's what was affecting these people. And that's how he was explaining what the world situation is like. He wasn't using these characters as his primary tools to tell
Mhm.
you what the setup was, which I thought was which can which can be a little irritating in the beginning, because you go like, okay, so what is the story, what's happening, why is the story not progressing, and why do I need to know about this party where these people have come and what are they talking about and how is this relevant to the story, why isn't anything moving ahead? But as you move on, you understand what the author was trying to say.
Yeah. Interesting. I think this book is offered first person narrative, Clara's viewpoint. And Klara is a robot, an artificial friend, an AF, a humanoid developed to keep company for lonely children. She's a glorified doll. So we get the entire narrative through Clara's viewpoint, and she doesn't feel the need to explain anything to the reader. She's just simply expressing what she sees and understands. And she's already come into the world without the gift that we all have of going through childhood and learning slowly through infancy, through adolescence to adulthood, and seeing the world and our culture and knowing it. She's just awakened one day, it seems, in a store window.
Fully conscious. Yes.
Yeah, fully conscious. So we start seeing the world through that narrator's eyes. And gradually we start seeing beyond what she has said through her observations. Like we understand it's a dystopian world. This is not an ideal world they live in. There has been some sort of economic distress. There's tremendous injustice in terms of equality, opportunity. Racism still exists. I believe there's probably some sort of environmental collapse that's happened. We don't know. And we never really do find out exactly. We just get hints of it.
Yes.
And you as the reader have to make up your mind or let your imagination tell you what's going on or what's happened.
And I think that's done very, very wonderfully and masterfully in the novel. And even the idea of racism is kind of inverted, according to my interpretations. It was inverted, upside down, and shown very differently. A lot of other authors have also done. David Mitchell also keeps doing that quite frequently. What I found primarily chilling towards the end of the novel was that the realization that the AF has a better understanding of human emotions than humans do themselves. So that was something which, came very starkly, because towards the end, when Rick is applying for the admission and the mother's trying to, work her way through, and then they come back and Klara says that he probably will because he still loves you and all of that. So, and the mother wasn't sure that, what was happening and what would happen and all of that. So that bit I found very interesting, that the AFs understand human emotions better than we humans ourselves do.
And the child shall lead them.
Yeah, but it was very upsetting also that the imagination of a world where kids will not really have any friends or any family members to really look after them and help them grow up. They'll just be left with these artificial friends, and that was something which was very unnerving to imagine. But I can very well see that happening.
Yeah, see, there's something that happened in society. It's the mother is raising her child Josie alone by herself. She has a housemaid to help her raise the child, but she's very much alone. The husband is divorced from her and he lives in some sort of a gated community. The wife somehow accuses the husband of being some sort of a racist. You can see it's very much almost like a criticism of the Trump movement, where white people feel that other races have gotten advantages and the white people are no longer privileged. And the father is living among that sort of gun-toting, insecure social community. So something's happened socially that makes this world feel very divided, very unsafe, very alone. There's also a social movement against the Klaras, against the artificial friends.
Yes.
So they themselves are in danger of people who want to attack them and hurt them.
Yeah, which kind of becomes very clear and apparent towards the end. Also, I kind of found it very... So when I started reading the book, I was marking it left, right, and center, and I was making so many notes and all of that. But it kept kind of pulling down my reading speed. So I stopped doing that because it was actually becoming a barrier for me to read it. But I love how, slowly and steadily it was portrayed that Klara is an artificial intelligence, but she's different from the others. She has a different way of observing. She has a different way of behaving. She has different sensitivities and all of that. And also the thought process and psychology, if we can call it that, of an artificial intelligence was very close to the ways a child would think. It was very simplistic and straightforward and uncomplicated. And these things, I think, are what really catch your attention when you start reading this book, because they are handled so beautifully. They are done so beautifully that just these feelings just jump off the pages to the reader.
Yeah, it's a delightful simplicity of style. Also fascinating to see how this robot understands or comprehends without addressing what she comprehends. There's a scene early on in the novel where Josie is having an actual in-house party with other teenagers. I think Josie is 14 years old. Josie is having a party with a handful of other teenagers who have also are also planning on maybe going or applying to the same sort of school. There's an important plot development. We should get to it in a moment. But to finish this thought, Klara is introduced to Josie's real friends or real classmates at this party. And the other classmates just want to treat her like a toy. And they say, one of the boys says, "Oh, I have a newer model. Mine is even better. She can do this. Can Klara land on her legs if I throw her up in the air?" That kind of not treating Klara as a human. And I don't remember exactly how Klara deals with it, but she, how do we say, I think she steps back and is not able to criticize. So in a strange way, it's also almost a portrayal of slavery.
It very much is. It very much is. And it very adequately shows the other side. A lot of other books have done that as well in the past. This one also does that. So that also is something which was very potently described in this novel. So Tim, when I was reading this novel, I kept classifying it differently at different parts of the novel. When I started reading this, I honestly didn't look at it as science fiction, but as it kept progressing, I did start to identify it as science fiction. And then later on, I was thinking, would speculative fiction be a more appropriate term for this, or what science fiction would be? So how do you identify this? How do you interpret this and classify this as a genre?
I'm not speaking with the voice of authority here. I'm just speaking from my simple, shallow understanding. I would say speculative fiction is more of a catch-all umbrella phrase that includes science fiction and fantasy fiction and magical realism. Yeah, I think speculative fiction is the safe way of addressing this kind of writing without getting people all twisted up in knots of anger and categorization fury. Science fiction, I've always taken it as being science used in fiction. So if you think of any of the most prominent or popular science fiction works, there's always the presence of science or technology. The traditional has always been space exploration technology. Lately, it's much more dystopian, social, artificial intelligence style science. But I've always remembered the definition being that science must be in the fiction. And that's why maybe some science fiction can be really dull. I think you once told me you did not totally enjoy The Martian because there's a little bit too much science and not enough storytelling
happening.
Yeah. While speculative, I can't even say the word, speculative fiction is that speculation, that throwing about of ideas, that what if. So that could include, what if dragons existed? What if people were as tall as a cup of coffee? You know, that's speculation. It's fun, it's playful. It can be magical, it can be supernatural. So you could also qualify horror as speculative fiction, but horror also has that aspect of it that is not supernatural or weird, like the slashers or a mass murderer story. There's nothing speculative about that, but there is something horrific. So anyway, yeah, I would say science fiction is speculative fiction. Just let's call it science fiction because I'm having trouble saying the word speculative.
Okay. Talking about this, I'm thinking that, back in the olden days when the science fiction was being identified as a genre, early 20s, we may say, and then all the way till the 50s, probably, if I'm not wrong?
Yeah, the classics.
The classics. So
The
we
50s and 60s when Ray Bradbury and Isaac, not
Asimov.
Isaac, Asimov. Thank you. I almost said Isaac Newton. Wrong apple.
Before, like before Ray Bradbury, I would say they were primarily utopian setups, and some issues
Mm,
were always cropping up. That
mhm.
was what generally used to happen in science fiction. But now that now most of the recent science fiction that we get, the idea is that it's a dystopian world. It's no
Yeah,
longer, almost never a utopia, almost
yeah.
never. And then there are further more problems. So, why do you think this shift has come in this genre like so starkly, and what's the reason behind this?
Because we're living in dystopia. Because
But
utopian dreams gave us nightmares like the Soviet Union or Mao's China or the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. All of those were utopian ideas gone wrong, nightmarishly wrong. And now we're living in greater dystopias. We're all terrified of global warming, of environmental catastrophe. You know, how's the temperature where you're living? We're all terrified of everything's going wrong around us. Oh, pandemic. Thank you.
so it's kind of a warning that this is already happening and we don't want things to go any further. So this cannot go unnoticed and you need to pay attention to this.
Yeah, yeah. It's so interesting because in the 60s and 50s, the fear was nuclear war. Now I think we've had threats of nuclear war from the Ukrainian invasion, and Putin has mentioned it. And when Trump was president, there was Korea's Kim and Trump saying, I have rockets bigger than your rockets. And yet today, it doesn't seem like younger people or even our generation is that afraid of our generation. I'm making myself young like you. Is that afraid of nuclear holocaust? But when I was a child and when my older brothers were roaming the earth, those days of dinosaurs, nuclear holocaust was a real fear. But nowadays, our real fear is that someday we're all going to overheat. We're all going to die of a zombie plague, things like that. So that's maybe why artists are addressing these fears with their fictions. There's a lovely collection of stories from writers from South Asia. It's called, I can't remember the title, shame on me, but it's a collection of South Asian writers, short fiction. And almost every single one of those stories is a dystopia, with one exception of a beautiful utopian story. It's one of Tarun Saint's collections.
You're not talking
It's
about the one that Hachette came out with?
not that one. This was in between that first volume and the
second
second volume that just came out a few months ago.
Okay.
No, this is a bilingual. It's Italian and English.
Mm-hmm.
That has one utopian story, and it's delightful. It's about a technology that has been able to mix plants with machines so that it's creating solar power that can power this whole city in India. And then they're noticing that their older towers of power are shutting down and the newer ones are taking over. And so the chief engineer, as she's walking through a small village and commenting about how they're using traditional architectural methods to save energy and keep the houses cool, while in the hills, these solar towers are providing energy for the big city. And she comes to realize that the solar towers themselves are growing, just like a plant grows old and replaces itself with new leaves. So these solar power trees are replacing themselves. The newer ones are coming online and killing the older ones. So it's just this beautiful utopian story that there is hope. And the hope comes from thinking in the future with technological skill and thinking in the past with traditional skills. So
it sounds very interesting. Do let me know the name of the book. I'll put it in the description so that anyone who's interested can go through that. Funny, we're talking about solar power because Klara and the Sun also, revolves around this only idea. Very interestingly, it has so much of subtext. It's so rich with subtext because humans create the AFs.
yeah.
They very simply identify sun as their god because that's where the power comes from, and that's why they start worshipping the sun.
Yeah.
And then in turn the artificial intelligence generate a religion. So that was again something which you were mentioning about a little while ago, and which I thought was quite fascinating.
By the way, the book is called Avatar, Avatar.
Okay.
The Klara and the Sun, what I found fascinating about that is how she turns her solar power into a religion. That was something that I found so amazing in this novel. Even a robot can discover God.
Yeah.
And she makes that bargain with God, because in this novel, the human child, Josie, the human teenager, is possibly dying. So Klara makes that deal with the sun, like many people do with a god. If you give me this, then I'll give you that. And Clara's compromise, or Clara's offer, is she will destroy this polluting machine. Yeah, in my imagination, I see it as some sort of a street construction vehicle. Sometimes when you see street workers, they're driving those construction vehicles. I guess that's the best I can come up with. But all of them are very heavily gas powered, and they all put out a lot of diesel fumes from their smokestacks. So I just felt like it's some sort of roadwork vehicle that she sees from the window of her shop, and she sees that it's making so much air pollution, and she doesn't realize this company has so many because it has to keep repairing the streets. So she goes on that environmental terrorist mission. She makes the deal with the sun. If you save Josie, my human friend, then I will destroy this monster.
Yeah.
I'll kill the dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing which obviously this book talks about is the idea of replacing humans by transferring their consciousness to someone, and it has a very interesting final take on that. Let's not give it out. Let's let that be the reason for someone to pick up the book and see what they have to say there.
You just said spoilers be damned, and here you go.
Okay, so we'll discuss that.
No, we don't have to.
No, maybe. Okay, we'll talk around it.
Something that is interesting, and you discover it less than halfway through the novel, is the whole reason that Klara has to make this bargain with the sun is because Josie is possibly dying, and Josie's older sister has died. And this is really part of that dystopian environment that we're never told about, but we have to assume, or we have to make our own connections in our mind. They are living in some sort of economic system where, in order to be economically successful, you have to go to college. In order to go to college, you have to not just have money, but you have to be super intelligent, really smart. And in order to be really smart, parents are having their children genetically modified, changed. And sometimes this genetic modification doesn't work, and the children will die. So Josie's older sister has died. And now, even with that experience, the mother has decided, because again, this is a single family. The father's not a part of this picture that much. The mother makes all the decisions. Even with the experience of having lost her first daughter because of this genetic change, the mother still decides to get her daughter Josie genetically modified. And then Josie gets sick. And that's where Klara comes into the picture in the plot giveaway that you don't want to discuss. But
So,
what a world.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say, that it's a very disturbing world that they're living in. But it's been very masterfully balanced, that it doesn't hit you like that. There's so much of scary stuff that is happening in the book, but it's narrated in a way that it doesn't disturb you the way it could have.
Or maybe in the other way around, the way that it's presented is even more terrifying, because we, the reader, come to this understanding very gradually. And when we do realize what kind of a world they're living in, we're just blown away, because we've come into it. We've slowly walked into our comprehension instead of just being told. Maybe if the novel had just told us, we wouldn't be so emotionally affected. Have you ever read Flowers for Algernon,
No,
the novella?
no.
I think it's from the 70s, and it's very similar in that it's narrated from the point of view of a mentally handicapped young man. He's got a job as a security guard in a company, and he can hardly read, he can hardly write, but somebody gives him an offer at the company where he works. Someone gives him the offer to take part in these experiments that will increase his intelligence. And as he increases his intelligence, his writing, the first person narrative, improves. The spelling is better, the sentence construction is better, until he reaches the point where he's a genius. And once he's a genius, he discovers he can fall in love and have a relationship. But then things go wrong, and he very gradually, and we see the digression in his writing style, he very gradually goes back to his mentally or intellectually handicapped state. And then we know that he goes even further and he dies. I think Klara and the Sun was very much affected by that very famous short story, Flowers for Algernon, and heartbreakingly so.
Tim, I got to know that this book was initially supposed to be young adult fiction. It was supposed to be a
Oh, really?
YA novel, but later on it was decided not to pitch it like that. But looking at it now and reading it and thinking about it, it does talk about the age group, and it does focus on the age group and all of that. So I can see why someone would identify it as a young adult novel. But what's your response to this? The idea that can we address this as young adult fiction?
I have a very low opinion of young adult fiction, because I've read a couple of books that just, when I was finished reading them, I thought, this is so narratively and intellectually simple. I don't know why I've just spent the past 5 or 6 hours reading this book. I could watch Friends on TV or something like that. So I've come away with a very bad opinion of young adult, because I just feel I want something a little bit more challenging. I can see that it could have been written as young adult, but certain passages, the nuance of the way the world is developed in this novel, and some of the depth of the philosophical basis of what we discover is the real crisis. You said it takes place about 3/4 of the way through the novel. We really see what's going on. And there's a philosophical discussion of that. And at the heart of it is the question, what is human? Can a human be replicated? Is Klara human? And it never really settles that discussion. Although at the very end, there's that one section, that one sentence where Klara discusses this directly. And I'll leave that up to you. But no, I think it could have been young adult, but the depth of philosophy and the narrative style itself would have been cut back a bit.
You know what I think? Back in the day, when Ursula K. Le Guin was writing young adult, and a few other, Robin Hobb was also writing young adult, and a few other authors were doing a wonderfully phenomenal job with that. The quality and the philosophical level was way
Yes.
higher than
Mm.
what we have today for young adult fiction. Because I read this Earth Sea Cycle, a few books from the Earth Sea Cycle, and I could see where it was going, and it was quite something. I have been dealing with teenagers. I've been conducting these workshops, and I am so many times taken aback by how smart those teenagers are and how much they know. It's like I would not even expect them to know so many things, but they already do. And at times, they actually know more than what I have already covered. So, I can very well see this as a young adult fiction in the 70s, but I can't see it a young adult fiction right now. Tim, I always feel that a good science fiction will always use science and scientific theories, advancements, projections, all of that. And at the heart of the novel would always be that one ethical, moral, or philosophical. Uh,
I like this Miracle. Welcome to my world.
I do it a
Tongue-tied
lot.
Tuesday.
I do it a lot. At times, I don't even realize that I have mispronounced something. Anyway, so at the heart of the story would always be this moral, ethical question, idea, or philosophy that it pushes through and makes you look at it. I just started watching the new Star Trek series. Every episode comes up with something like that. This book also touched that. It talks about the idea of love, the the idea of human heart, not biologically but otherwise, and it comments upon whether a person can be completely replicated and replaced. So, and very interestingly, how the book concludes is it says that you cannot replace a person because the
Mm.
person as themselves are not special. What makes them special is the special place they have in your heart.
Hmm.
And if you use artificial intelligence and you replace that person completely, physically and mentally and emotionally,
Yeah.
even then your response is not going to be exactly the same as it was for the real person. And that's why you can never replace a human being and expect to have the same kind of love in your heart and your world not missing anything out of it. I thought that was very beautifully put, which is such a simple
Mm.
thought, and it was so profoundly put through. So Tim, your final thoughts about Clara and the Sun. Like it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize and it didn't make it.
But I believe his previous novel, Remains of the Day.
Remains of the Day, he won the
Yes,
Booker for
yes.
that.
I think Clara and the Sun is a novel that your workshop students might enjoy if they want an example of how to write simply and yet with also incredible depth, using suggestion and just a first person narrator who assumes that you, the reader, understand because you're part of her world. It's a brilliant style that they can enjoy reading. And there's nothing incomprehensible about the novel, except perhaps the way Clara sees the world.
That I had a difficulty understanding. That was something which I didn't really get.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking, to me, that was fascinating that as a robot, she sees the world in that
Boxes.
sectioned off
Yeah.
pixelations,
Yeah.
that when she sees something, it takes up 25% of her screen or 100% of her screen. It's a fascinating idea.
Hmm.
Other than that, everything in this novel is completely,
Straightforward and simple.
yeah, straightforward and comprehensible.
Yeah.
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 So I'd recommend it for your students.
Yeah. So, Tim, thank you so much for this wonderful discussion. I'm sure those who were listening must have gained a lot out of this conversation in terms of how science fiction is dealt and how we read it and what are the interpretations and all of that. Lastly, what are you reading these days? Anything interesting that you're reading?
I don't know about interesting. I just recently finished, hang on there. A while ago, I finished Perma Red, Native American story. And what I found fascinating about this is the whole novel is about one man's or two men's attempt to win the heart of one woman. And of these two men, one of them tries to use witchcraft. It's fascinatingly dark, the beginning of this novel. I'm reading right now a Singaporean novel called The Shrimp People, which looks at the 1950s and 60s setting of Malaysia and Singapore from the viewpoint of a group of, they were Eurasians, Portuguese and Malaysian ancestry, so racially mixed, not pure Malaysian, not pure Chinese. And I've known nothing about this group in Singapore or Malaysian history.
Okay, Tim. So thank you so much for this, and let's do it again sometime soon. And until then,
Sure. It's always a pleasure, and
thank
good
you
luck
so
with your new workshop classes.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, have
Okay.
fun.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, the kids are lucky to have such an excellent teacher.
Well, you're too kind. Okay. Thanks,
All
Tim.
right, man.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night. Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.